Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Yovanov. I love the unknown when it comes to musical theater, be it a new show or an older show that I'm just discovering. And that's why my radio station, Musical Theater Radio, sounds the way it does. And I think our next guest embodies that belief as well. Of course, if I'm wrong, he's going to tell me, but they are a music director, performance coach, producer of the Lost Broadway CD series, and a sheet music expert. So I think my statement is at least a little bit true about them. Let's welcome to the show and officially find out if it is true, Michael Lavine. Michael, hello.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. So before we get into all that stuff we just talked about, I'd like to get to know our guest a little bit. So in 30 seconds, who is Michael Lavine? The 30-second bio of Michael.
Well, I went to college at Columbia University, so I've been in New York since I was 18, and I loved musicals growing up. My parents instilled a love of that in me, and I had been collecting sheet music since I was a kid and inherited a number of collections. And I help people out when they're looking for new material. They come to me, or when they ask, or I get emails from around the world looking for that piece of sheet music they can't find. So that keeps me very busy. But I also work as a vocal coach. I also work as a conductor, musical director. I've been doing a lot of concerts lately at 54 Below. I like teaching. I think I'm a good musician, and I like teaching at conservatories around the world.
Nice. Very right under 30 seconds. Perfect.
Tried.
So let's think back. So you said you were into musical theater and that sort of thing when you were a kid. What was the impetus? What drove you to that?
Well, my mother grew up in New York City. She's still around, going to be 98 in December. She was born in 1924, and she lived in New York City and started going to musicals in the 30s and the 40s, and she loved it. So as I was growing up, my parents would take us to shows. My dad played clarinet and sax in the big bands in the 1940s, so he was very well versed in music. His cousin was Barbara Carroll, a famous jazz pianist, singer, and we would go see her in New York. And we grew up in the 60s and 70s going to see shows. My first show was the all black revival of Guys and Dolls in the 70s, and Magic Show. And then, so we saw shows growing up. And so I always had a love for it. They had records of old shows that I would listen to. My mother tells a story of being taken on a date in New Haven to the opening night of My Fair Lady, the original My Fair Lady, sitting next to Moss Hart, who was scribbling notes furiously on a yellow legal pad. And she was like fascinated when they suddenly started singing The Rain in Spain, because they all knew Pygmalion, and they were like, wow. So she knew it before anybody knew it in New York. She did go back when she saw things in New York. She'd sit up in the balcony for, 50 cents or 30 cents, 20 cents, whatever it cost. And so I've had this instilled in me since I was young, just kept it going.
Very cool. Well, I'm always curious, when you're growing up, you obviously had a passion for the arts and theater. Was there anything else you thought you might want to do? Anything other job that went, you know what? Maybe.
In my mind, I think I wanted to be a fireman. I think when I was in first grade, they'd say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, a fireman. And that was in my mind. That just popped back into my head. As soon as you said that, I remember when I was a kid, fireman was what I wanted to be. And then I never thought, I guess then eventually, as I would do children's theater growing up, I realized I loved acting and I wanted to be an actor. And I still do partake in that when I can. And I sing in these concerts and sing when I'm teaching and whenever I can. But I realized I was getting, when I sat at an open call many years ago for a national tour of Little Shop of Horrors to play Seymour with a room full of Seymours, 10 minutes went by, a half hour went by, 3 hours went by, and I finally just psyched myself out. I'm pretty sure I didn't even audition. I just got so nervous. And I thought, I'm making so much money and getting so much work as a pianist, so why don't I go where the work's taking me? And I never looked back, occasionally able to dabble as an actor. But for example, I'm doing on Monday, a week from today, on the 19th of September, I'm playing a show by Tom Leopold. Tom Leopold was a writer on Seinfeld and Cheers, and he wrote a musical called Kip and Sylvia, live from D-Deck, I think it is. It's about a husband and wife songwriters named Kip and Sylvia Glasscock, and they're on this ship that's like going down, and everything's happening around them, and they sing songs that he wrote. And Kip and Sylvia are being played by Richard Kind and Jackie Hoffman, and it sold it. The whole show sold it. Both show, the whole run of the show sold out in like an hour because it's Richard Kind and Jackie Hoffman, and everybody loves them. And I play their pianist, and I had an affair with Jackie's character, and I get to sing a song, and I get to act, and it's just a great experience to be able to do it all. I'm so happy to be part of that. My friend Karen Carpenter is directing it. He's a great director. You should know.
That's awesome. That sounds like so much fun.
It's gonna be fun.
Let's see that.
I hope we bring it to Toronto eventually.
I'm here. I will get a ticket. I will sit in the front row or wherever I can afford 50 cents in the back. That's all I can afford. So you said you moved to New York for
college.
school.
Yeah, I went to Columbia University, same class as Barack Obama, go figure. And actually at Barnard, when I was at Columbia, was this 18-year-old kid who I did a class with, and we were two pianists, and her name that back then was Janine Tesoriero. And then when she cut the arrow and became Janine Tesori and wrote Thoroughly Modern Millie, what else did she write? Violet, Fun Home, Carolina Change, and now Kimberly Akimbo, which is about to start performances in around a month on Broadway, which is fantastic, having seen it twice off Broadway. Wow. But I grew up, knew her when we were both 18, so that was a long time ago.
What was that like moving to New York at that time?
It was great. I mean, as I said, I'd gone up, a lot when I was a kid, but I picked Columbia. I mean, because I had a lot of family. My mother went there, my grandfather went there, my cousin went there, my aunt went there, so many relatives. And it was in New York, and all the other colleges I was considering saying, we're only an hour and a half from New York City. And I thought, when you're in New York, you're in New York. And whenever it was the choice between studying for a final exam or going to the opening night of a new Broadway show, well, I saw a lot of Broadway shows, and I did fine, but it was a great experience to get to see. So a great experience was in December 79, I went to see Sweeney Todd. I had seen it in April when it first opened. We'd gone to New York, and I decided to go on my own. And then I went to the 50th Street subway station, realized I was standing amongst the chorus, all the chorus members of Sweeney Todd. And I started chatting with them. And one of them came up to me and said, well, dear boy, I give voice lessons. And that was Joaquin Romaguera, the original Pirelli in Sweeney Todd, the Italian barber. So I started studying with Joaquin. I would play for his other students and get half price lessons. So instead of $50 an hour back in 1980, I would get him for $25. And he had me singing bees. I realized I was a tenor. I was a wonderful experience. And I would go. Back then, the security wasn't as tight as it is now. So I would go to the stage door, and they said, oh yeah, go up to Joaquin's dressing room. And Joaquin's dressing room was next to Ken Jennings, or the original Tobias, and Ed Lindeck, the original Judge Turpin. So I would spend time with all three of them, chatting with them. And my friend and I would, every once in a while, we'd go up there. I saw Sweeney 15 times, the original production, but every once in a while we would play Hal Prince for a night, and we'd say to Ed Lindeck, would you do that thing you do? So do you know Sweeney Todd pretty well, John Paul?
I know it pretty well.
Well, when the judge is about to be killed by Sweeney Todd and he gets away and he runs down the steps muttering. Yep. Well, when we told him to do what we wanted him to do, he would run down the steps going, she says she'll marry her Sunday. That's what she says. He would do the lyric from the song that Anthony sings. And I wish I told Hal Prince that, because it was such a fun time. But the first time Joaquin took me downstairs onto the stage, I was behind a pillar. If I went like that, I'd be in full view of the audience. He said, I'll be right back. And he sang, swing your razor. And he went up on stage. Literally, I was on stage. And then I went to Angela Lansbury and Len Carey's last performance. And I found myself on stage after the show. I found Angela's quick change dressing room on the side and found this handkerchief with all her makeup on it, found her photographs with her stationery. And I stuck a bunch of things in my pocket and walked out with them. And I've done a number of things with Len Carey. I just did a concert with Len on Tuesday. He was brilliant. And he was over here rehearsing, and I pulled it all out, and he went, oh, of course I remember that handkerchief. I was like, of course you do, because you used it probably to wipe it up if it's your makeup. So that was an incredible experience, that when I was in New York in 1979 when I was a kid.
Wow. I don't know if that's good or bad advice to just strike up a conversation with a stranger in a New York City subway.
Well, I recognized some of them. I realized
that's
just
good.
seen them in Sweeney Todd and just started chatting with them. And then he came over and was like so flamboyant. Believe it or not, Joaquin's still alive. He's 90, just turned 90. Wow. He lives out in a suburb of Orlando. And since I'm going to be in Tampa for a month next month, I'm going to look him up, because I haven't seen him in many, many, many years. I just have such fond memories of him. He was just fantastic in the show. The original cast album, you can see how brilliant he was in the show.
No, that's fantastic. You and that's the thing, you never know who you're going to meet, and I've talked to people and we all agree, just talk to people. because you never know where it's going to lead to, and the friendships and the relationships and the opportunities.
Excellent advice.
It's just
Excellent advice.
say hello, say hi, because what's the worst that's going to happen, right?
Right. In New York City, people do go up to people, you know, there's a song, "It's a Most Unusual Day" from Love from Judy, or no, not from another movie. It's a most unusual day, and there are people meeting people. I think that, yes, people should meet people. So I think it's great, and that's what the song "People" is about, right? But people who meet people are the luckiest people in the world. I think it's just great to go up to people in New York City, and especially in New York, which is such an open people, with people walking around on the streets. And it's easy just to go up to people. Just don't, get, if they have the mask on, don't be like, take your mask off, right? But
So let's talk about some of the stuff you do. You said you're a performance coach. Tell us exactly what that means to you.
So if I have a new student coming here, as a coach, there's so many different directions you go as a coach. Typically, I'll have students who will have recently gotten out of conservatory, or even be in high school and get ready to go to conservatory, and they want new material to sing, either for auditions, for their cabaret act, for a party, for fun, for whatever. And I will, hear them sing something of their own, and I'll think, oh, that reminds me of this. Why don't you do this? And I will show them material and give them copies of the sheet music and say, work off this stuff for yourself. And but the other things, for example, I had a student yesterday who has an audition today in around an hour for Hamilton, and he was given all the material to learn. So he came over twice in a row, on Sunday and Monday, to go over all the songs and really be, diligent. He knew he wanted to sing the tenor line. I would plunk it out for him. Nowadays, they're given MP3s, performers, so they don't feel the need necessarily to come to a pianist. But he wanted to really hear and have me coach him on it and say, no, you're not, you're a little flat on that note. You need to fix that. I mean, I think it would be smart for performers to go to coaches still, because a lot of performers think, now I'm given the recording, I don't even need to work with a coach. But I think, we will help them in the acting. If they like him, he will go on to what they call Hamilton camp, where they will take him through and really work with him to prepare him for the audition for Lin-Manuel and Tommy Kail, so that, to see whether he'll be appropriate to go into the show.
Wait, there's Hamilton camp? What is
that?
There
used to be Frankie camp, which is a camp where they took all the potential Frankie Valleys for Jersey boys and worked with them at a very intensive situation where they could see, so that they went into the audition, they were prepared, and they didn't have to give them adjustments in the audition. Can you try it this way? Can you go back and come back? Maybe you'll have it this way. And a lot of people who got Frankie got it from being in this camp and being totally prepared by the musical supervisor of the show, so that they knew what to do when they went in for the producers and the director, and they saw that they were at their best. They still may not get it for whatever reason, but at least that they've done the work. And now they have it for Hamilton, for, I think, since the beginning. They've had it for Hamilton, where they take a group of people who are being considered. They pass, the basic tests, like they can sing, they look the part, they can dance, they're right, and they work with them on the dancing too, on the choreography. And so they come back and they're really as prepared as possible. If they don't get it, it's for other reasons rather than their unpreparedness, which is nice.
I've never heard of that. Maybe I'm just out of the loop, but is that a relatively
I think it's when producers have enough money that they can justify this. I think Jersey Boys was, when it first opened, was doing so well, and just like Hamilton now, that they feel this is a good thing. I think a lot of producers don't feel the need to do that. They're like, if they come in and they do the work, I'll either rehearse them and teach them the part or not, whatever.
Wow, that's very interesting. So, and I agree with you. I think you need to come in and see a live human being. Just because you have the music on an MP3 doesn't mean you know everything, because you bring obviously something that they can't see. So is there a difference between a vocal coach and a performance coach, or are they kind of the same, or are they?
Where there's a vocal, I think of myself as a vocal coach. I've never called myself a performance coach, but I guess I'm working on the performance. But as a vocal coach, you do so many things. You'll work with them on an audition. You'll work with them on getting them new material. You'll work with them on getting the rhythm and notes of a song right. I've had students come who just want to work on a song and tell me, what am I doing wrong? And I am kind of really a real stickler for getting the lyrics right and the music right. I mean, people get lyrics wrong all the time, and in shows on Broadway, they get songs wrong. And I think when a lyricist takes the time to write every A, and the, much less other lyrics, I really want to point that out and say, you're not getting that. Or they're not getting a laugh. I mean, Sondheim said the single biggest reason people don't get laughs in songs is because the audience doesn't understand the lyric. And when you're not being enunciating with your song, I will always say to them, it sounds like you have marbles in your mouth. Or my big line I say to them is, what language are you speaking? Because when I just don't understand them. So I will really be on their case. Or I will be a real stickler for when they're just a little flat or a little sharp. I say, you're just a little under that pitch. You're not doing that, or that rhythm isn't right. If you do the rhythm right, you're going to get a better laugh or be more poignant. It will land better. Yeah. So I'm really on their case for that reason. And, as a coach, there's, as I say, there's so many, as a pianist in general, there's so many different directions you can go. You can be conducting an orchestra. You can play in a pit of a band. You can play parties, play concerts, play shows. I'm comparing myself to a voice teacher who works on the technique of your voice, as opposed to a vocal coach who literally coaches you on the songs. So those are the two real terms, vocal coach and voice teacher.
Okay.
I've never heard the term performance coach. Maybe that's a Canadian thing, but I don't know. Or you just came up with it. And
honestly, I think I saw it on your website.
Maybe somebody, I didn't even view my website. So somebody probably wrote that there and I went, okay, whatever that means.
Okay. Because I'm reading, I grabbed it right off your website.
Sounds fine. That's good.
That's too funny. But you know what, as a lyricist, I thank you for everything you just said. We create these words in a specific way, in a specific pattern, in a specific order. And yeah, you think when, as a singer singing it, oh, it's just that. No, it's not just that.
And when they lose a rhyme, because I will say to them, look, that doesn't rhyme. You added an S and there's not an S in the word you're singing. And some lyricists are not as good as others. There's some lyricists who just like more pop lyricists and country lyricists, or lyricists who haven't necessarily learned the craftsmanship of writing lyrics. There's a lyricist on Broadway who I'm not going to name, but I'm not fond. I like him so much, and he's a composer too, but his lyrics don't rhyme. I mean, I sat there with my program on the back of the program, writing all the lines that didn't rhyme. And by the intermission, my program was completely full of things that didn't rhyme. However, I've had the great fortune to get to know a number of Broadway lyricists over the years, and I've discussed this with them, and they are so, like you, they're very glad that I'm standing up for what they write and making sure the audience knows that these are good lyrics. Otherwise, they think, boy, he's a terrible lyricist if it doesn't rhyme. I first started when I was at Columbia. I took a course with Lee Adams. Do you know the name Lee Adams? He wrote Bye Bye Birdie and all those stuff with Charles Strauss. Lee Adams is also still alive. He's 98 years old. He lives in Briarcliff Manor in Westchester. And a couple of months ago, I drove up to visit him. And it was like seeing from over 40 years ago, my college professor. And when I was taking the course with him, Bring Back Birdie, the sequel to Bye Bye Birdie, was playing on Broadway. And I went every Monday night. I saw it 7 times and saw 7 different shows, because they would write. He would say, this week we cut a song. There was a song called Don't Say F-A-T in front of Conrad, because it was about Fat Conrad Birdie, Fat Elvis. And then they cut that song. So we cut that song this week. And, it was just fascinating education, learning about him. And then I did a show in 1985 called On the Brink. It was a review by Noel Katz, a composer friend of mine I'd gone to college with, and we cast Amanda Green. And when we looked at her photo, we went, I know those teeth. The Greens have 2 children, Adam and Amanda. This is Adolph Green's daughter. So we cast Amanda. Amanda she's a beautiful woman. I mean, back then she was beautiful. You could tell she was Phyllis Newman's daughter, but also from the teeth, I was like, and that's Adolph's teeth, right? But she is now a Broadway lyricist for many, many years. She wrote the lyrics to High Fidelity. She just closed her latest show, Mr. Saturday Night, starring Billy Crystal, with music by Jason Robert Brown. So I'm so happy for her. But Adolph and Phyllis came to the show, and many years later, I had a student who was reading the newspaper to Adolph every day. He had macular degeneration and couldn't see, so she was reading, and she said, "Do you want to go over to Adolph's and read the newspaper to him?" I said, "Yes." And Adolph said, "Well, do you want to go over to the piano now?" And I said, "Sure." So we started playing songs. He said, "Now, how much do I pay you?" And I said, "Oh, no, I've got to pay you," because I was so excited to spend this time. And I live across the street from where Betty Comden lived. And Adolph would call me and say, "Michael, it's Adolph. I'm over at Betty's. It's raining out. Can I come over?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, come over." So he came over all the time. And I'd become friends with Hugh Martin. Do you know Hugh Martin? Hugh Martin, for those of you who don't know, wrote Clang, Clang, Clang with the Trolley, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, The Boy Next Door. And he lived to be 96 too. So there's something in the air about writing Broadway musicals, you look at Stephen Sondheim, who lived to be 91, Sheldon Harnick's 98, John Cantor's in his mid-90s, as is Charles Strauss and Lee Adams, as I said. So something about writing musicals keeps you alive into your 90s. So it's a wonderful thing. And you can go back. Irving Caesar lived to be 100. So it's very exciting. But 99, something like that.
Yeah.
So I become friendly with Hugh Martin. And when Adolph was over here, we called Hugh Martin, and I thought, boy, Adolph and Hugh Martin talk to the greats of musical theater, talking to each other in different coasts. But I love getting to know these composers and doing concerts of their stuff and sharing their material with the world and telling them that I am sharing this stuff. It's just great.
Yeah,
which is how I get into lesser known songs, because that's what I'm known for. I like showing people that there are wonderful songs that if you're singing in an audition, you don't have to sing Almost Like Being in Love at every audition. I can show you a song maybe that was cut from Bring It In, or I can show you a song that's just as good, but not every fifth person in the audition is not going to sing it. So they don't go, oh, here's a song we've heard a million times. That may not, sometimes that's not the best thing to do. Sometimes Sondheim always said he liked to hear songs that he knew. So, but then I would say, don't do songs that are so overdone. There's certain songs you're going to hear all the time. So that's why my love of lesser known songs has served me well with coaching.
Well, that's the perfect segue, because I was going to say, a friend of mine says, this is what he said to me, you have the premier collection of sheet music and scores on the planet Earth. And I know you like rare stuff. So
people say, yeah, I have the largest collection of sheet music anywhere. And I would say I like to say one of the larger. If you say I have the largest, somebody's going to come around and say mine's bigger than yours. So I said, okay, I like to say one of the larger privately held collections of sheet music in the States, because probably anywhere, because like Michael Feinstein obviously has thousands of sheets more than I do. But we do trade with each other all the time. We're emailing each other. Do you have this? Yes, I have this. Yeah. And I often have things he does not have, because I collected, became friends with a guy named Arthur Siegel. Arthur wrote the music to a lot of the New Faces reviews in the 1950s and 60s, New Faces of 52, which gave the start to people like Eartha Kitt and Paul Lynde and Mel Brooks. And then 68, which is Madeline Kahn. All these great stars got their start with these reviews in the 50s and 60s. And Arthur lived across the street from me. He'd been collecting since he was 12 years old. And he died in 1994 at the age of 70. And people like Richard Rodgers and Julie Stein would send him sheet music saying, will you please give our stuff out there to proliferate it in the world? And they would give him manuscript stuff that nobody else had. So when I inherited Arthur's collection, a lot of Richard Rodgers, mainly Rodgers and Hart material, from like either in Rodgers' hand or in a copyist's hand, but things that never made it to score, or they were written with no chord symbols. They were just single notes without chords or chord symbols. You had to figure out, kind of guess on chords. And over the years, I got on retainer with the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization. And every once in a while, Ted Chapin, who used to run it, would ring me up or call me and write me and say, I'm looking for this weird Rodgers and Hart song. For some reason, we don't have it in our files. I doubt you have it. I said, strangely enough, I do. And they were in charge of Irving Berlin also. And he wanted at one point a great song. Do you know the movie Holiday Inn, which is where White Christmas began, before the movie White Christmas, written for Holiday Inn? There's a song called I Can't Tell a Lie. I could say that you're lovely, just as lovely could be, but this is Washington's birthday and I can't tell a lie. You know, it's an adorable little song, and it was published. But for some reason, the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization, which had theoretically every Irving Berlin song, didn't have it. I said, you guys need to have this, and stuff like that. So my friend, one of my closest friends is Mark Horowitz, who's the head of the music specialist at the Library of Congress. He wrote this book, Sondheim on Music, you may know, that has had 3 editions, where he had a camera crew around with 2 different cameras at Sondheim's. You can see all the videotapes of those interviews with Sondheim. And he would say, well, Steve, you wrote this like 6/4 chord here, and what does this mean? And it was very scholarly, but then Sondheim would go into stories about the shows. Yeah. Great book, fascinating book. And, you know, Mark, I met him at the twin Xerox machines at the Library of Congress when we were young, we were in our 20s. And Mark has helped the library acquire many collections. Like they're going to get Sondheim's collection, and they have a lot of other people. Just like the New York Public Library, where I live next door to them, the Library of Performing Arts has a lot of collections. And recently I've just been discovering some of the collections they have, like the Fred Ebb collection, which has all these cut songs from Cabaret, cut songs from Florida Red Menace, cut songs from all their shows, early versions of songs. Like the song Roxy from Chicago was originally an up-tempo song. It went, the name on everybody's lips gotta be, but it was all these lyrics you don't know that were cut, and it's fascinating. And I also called up the Jerry Bach folder, 50 boxes of material. And I called up, started going through them, found all these cut songs from Fiddler, from She Loves Me. I found a song cut from She Loves Me called O Mio Friendino, which is the first draft of what eventually became Vanilla Ice Cream. But it's a completely different song. It has the same idea, but it's all different music. Again, it was just single notes, no chords, because it was just like a draft. But then I found a song called Tonight's the Night, which became Tonight at 8. But again, it's the first early version, where in the last page, you see Sheldon had written around 30 rhymes for the word tonight. And it's just fascinating, these things. So I love finding this kind of thing, because I think it's just fascinating to share it with people and show people. Someday I'll get up and start doing what you're doing and start a recording podcast where I start singing these things for people so they can hear them, because I think people need to know this stuff. It's fascinating. So
it's true. It's and thank you for people like yourself who are archiving and keeping these things alive, because we're losing all of this stuff. As the farther we go, as you said, people, that you're talking about are getting up there, or they're already gone, and we're never going to get these back. And there's so much good stuff out there that we don't know, and I think the newer people can learn from these, and because like you said, rhyming isn't always their strong suit sometimes. Now,
do you know who Stephen Lutvack is? He wrote the music to a show called A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder,
yes,
which was on Broadway.
Yep.
And Steve's an old friend of mine, over 30 years, and Steve teaches musical theater writing for new musical theater writers at NYU for many years. And he goes to me almost daily he wants to show them the great songs of Rodgers and Hart, Gershwin, everybody. So he's constantly writing me saying, can you send me a copy of this music, this music, this music? And I said, yes, these are great. So I'm so glad you're proliferating this and giving them this music out to these composers so they can study, and he will point out to them, that's a bad rhyme. That's not a good thing. And talking about bad rhyming, there was a wonderful composer named Bill Solly. Bill wrote a musical called Boy Meets Boy, you may know, which was a kind of parody of the Boy Meets Girl, Boy Loses Girl, but with a gay subplot.
Yeah.
And he wrote a song called The World's in Rhyme. And I'm going to sing it to you right now, because it's kind of an amusing song where the entire song, and I think more than anybody, I think, Jean-Paul, you'll probably appreciate this more than anybody else, because being a lyricist yourself, I'm going to minimize you so I can actually see your reaction. But the song goes something like this. I'm in love and the world's in rhyme. It's amazing the rhymes I find. Like, for instance, I feel so young and I want to smile at everyone. I have found my ideal at last, and she's all that a boy could ask. I'm a poet and life is bliss. I'm glad that I exist. It's oh so lovely, rhymes below and above me, even a cup of coffee, if I sip it softly. Neat is how everybody rates my new way with a turn of phrase. I'm in love and the world's divine, and one big perfect rhyme. So it's all, and there's a whole other verse, but it's all just all half rhymes. And the sad thing is that people today go, that's cute. And I go, no, you don't understand. It's brilliant, because it's all half rhymes. And
exactly.
I just think this is the kind of thing that I think is just so funny, that I wish people would hear it and go, this is what you're not supposed to do. Now, I've sung that song I've sent it to Stephen Sondheim, who loved it. I've sung it here to Adolph Green. I've sung it to Hugh Martin. I've sung it to a lot of lyricists over the years, and they all love it, because it's hard to write all half rhymes like that. Although today everybody does it. It's just ridiculous and bad, but there you go.
Yeah, I slap myself if I ever write something like that. I'm like,
Good.
no, stop
Good.
that.
That's great. I approve. That's great.
That's awesome. I'd love to talk a little bit about the Lost Broadway series, the CDs. How did you get involved doing that or producing that?
Well, years ago, Bruce Yecko is a record producer. He's been around a very, very long time. He first did the record of The Baker's Wife, the Stephen Schwartz show in the mid-70s. And he produced with Robert Scher. Robert Scher is an old friend of mine. He's a record producer, produced Oh Brother, the musical version of the Comedy of Errors.
Yeah.
He produced, right now, he's just finished the record of The Music Man with Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster. And he produced Gypsy with Patti LuPone, Nice Work If You Can Get It. He's been nominated for 7 Grammys. But Bruce was involved with Robert originally, and Bruce came to me and said, what if we take all this music from your collection and start recording these songs? And the ostensible, it was called, we decided to call it Lost Broadway and More. And the and more meant we could do things necessarily that weren't necessarily from Broadway. We could do film or other things. But our ostensible idea was to record songs that had never been recorded from Broadway shows. And of course, that led to a lot of cut songs. And the first one I did was called was Lost Broadway Volume 3. I was involved with 1 and 2, but they were a mishmash where he just threw up a bunch of stuff up against a wall and just put it out. And I said, let's craft this as a review. I'm going to call it Michael Lavine and Friends, and we'll open with the title song from a Broadway flop called Ain't Broadway Grand. The lyrics were by Lee Adams, who we were just talking about, and the music was by Mitch Lee, who wrote the music to Man of La Mancha. And it was about Mike Todd, the theater producer. It took place in the 50s. And the opening song, we decided to sing, the title song, we took Ain't Broadway Grand. And I got a group of people and we recorded it. And then, so we had an opening number. We had actually, no, I think that wasn't the opening number. The opening number was a musical called Good Time Charlie. It starred Joel Grey and Anne Reinking about the Dauphin, Joan of Arc and the Dauphin. And the music was by Larry Grossman, lyrics were by Hal Hackedy, and it was a great score. We did a song called I think it was cut from Good Time Charlie. How obscure is that? And the song was called These Are Tomorrow's Good Old Days. And it was about, and then one of the lines is, these are tomorrow's good old tunes, about how these are tunes that got away that nobody knows. And that's what the show was about. And I think the piece de resistance, I sang a song on the CD called Thank You for Coming. Thank You for Coming was cut from Merrily Roll Along. And I had an overture where I played it with 4 hands. I did several, or 6 hands, did several takes on the piano and put it all together and did that song as an instrumental. At the end of the song of the show, the whole CD, I sing this song. It was cut from Merrily Roll Along, sung in the review that they do in Merrily in the second act. And the melody was the same melody as Good Thing Going, because the whole joke of the show is that Franklin Shepard could only write one song. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. We're awfully glad that you came. We're glad you're here and you made it past the drunks. We're even gladder you're not at Julius Monk's Thank You for Coming. Julius Monk was a big producer of reviews in the 1950s, Dime Dozen, Demi Dozen. And but one of the things was I wanted to record 5 songs with Sheldon Harnick, and I wanted Sheldon to come up with 5 songs that we should record. And one of them he wrote a musical of It's a Wonderful Life called A Wonderful Life. So he got my friend Christine. You may know Christine Petty from Sirius Radio. She's not Seth Rudetsky, the other one. She's the queen of Forbidden Broadway for many, many years. Does all the impersonations. One of my oldest friends and dearest friends, and she did a duet of the song A Wonderful Life with Sheldon, which was great. Then we wanted to record a song called You Could Have the Richest Man in Town, and it was a Mottel Kamzoil song that was cut from Fiddler on the Roof. Now, there was a theater critic you may have heard of named John Simon. He was the theater critic for New York Magazine for around 40 years, and he was having a 90th birthday party. I went to the party and I ran into Austin Pendleton. Austin Pendleton, you may know, was the original Mottel in Fiddler. And I told him this story, and I was planning to sing it myself. And Austin just looked at me innocently and said, I could sing it. I was like, oh my God. So Austin came over here with Sheldon. Sheldon coached him. He said, it's like davening, in Jewish, you could have. And Austin was like, I got it. Came into the studio, told us all kinds of anecdotes, and we recorded it. Then I got Sheldon himself to sing A Butcher's Soul, which is a cut song for Laser Wolf. Wow. Now, when they made the Yiddler, I call it the Yiddler, the Yiddish production of Fiddler on the Roof, that is now coming back, that Joel Grey directed. Robert Sher, I was just telling you about, produced that album, and he got the idea to record the 15 cut songs from Fiddler on the Roof with people like Richard Kind, Ramin Karimloo, Jackie Up, and all kinds of people. And he got Austin Pendleton to sing another cut song, but he did have somebody sing these songs. I was going to do a Lost Broadway and More volume called The Jews, where I was going to do all Jewish themed. And I have a lot of it recorded. I just haven't put it out yet. It's been in the can for many years. But the piece de resistance of Michael Lavine and Friends was, I found a song that was cut from Take Me Along, not a well-known musical. It's a musical by Bob Merrill, a musical of Our Wilderness. And the song is called If Jesus Don't Love You, Jack Daniels Will. And I said, this is a funny song. I said, let's get Christine Petty and myself And then I said to Sheldon Harnick, I said, would you want to sing with me in this? He said, sure, I'll do it. He was up for anything. And I got a wonderful actress named Michelle Ragusa to sing the fourth part. And Michelle also sang another one of Sheldon's choices. I couldn't do anything. It's a song another from A Wonderful Life. I wouldn't be with anyone but you. And I couldn't be with anyone but you. But so I'm in the studio standing next to Sheldon and we're singing harmony together. It was really exciting. Again, I haven't put it out yet, but I'm going to put it out someday, I hope. And I've loved doing these albums. We did one of all Julie Stein and Comden Green, either with each other or with other collaborators. And Christine saying I did it on roller skates, which was cut from Funny Girl. But that's the ad. If you remember the logo for Funny Girl was a woman upside down on roller skates. It's the original logo. You just Google Funny Girl. It's the first thing you see.
Yeah.
On the poster, on the sheet music. But that was a song that was cut that they often did that. We also had a song called When the Weather's Better, which was cut from Hallelujah Baby, yet that was the artwork was with the umbrellas with the weather's better. But so that happens a lot. That's what we did all this. And I've loved doing these albums, and I'm now kind of doing them on my own. And I have a lot of stuff in the can. I just haven't put anything out yet. Which will be fun.
That's awesome. I love hearing that sort of thing and these stories. Thank you for just telling us this.
Pleasure, of course. It's fun to do this.
I love having people on who can tell us about people that we might not know of. We know their names and what they've done, but we don't necessarily know that next level down, that personalized, and it's so interesting. Thank you, Michael, for
of course, my pleasure. I mean, that's what's been great about doing these concerts is getting to do. I've done a number of concerts lately at 54 Below with older stars of Broadway who people should know and do know probably, but now they can see them if they live stream the concert, or send them a video if they want it. But I did a show Sunday night. Rob Schneider, who has the podcast Behind the Curtain, has written a book that just came out called 50 Key Musicals. He wanted to write a book celebrating 50 of the seminal Broadway musicals of all time. And he had each different people in the business, like Charles Busch and Peter Felicio, write an article about each show. And he said, let's present 10 of those shows Sunday night at 54 Below. So we had Arbender Robinson, who understudied Billy Porter and a bunch of other actors in the original production of Shuffle Along. He sang a song from Shuffle Along, talked all about the history of Shuffle Along. He was with the very, very first workshop, so he told how it all came to be. We had Ed Dixon, who was in the original cast of No No Nanette, the revival in 1971, talk all about how that show came about. We had Penny Fuller and Anita Gillette, two of our great Broadway talents, who were both of them were the two replacements for Jill Hayworth in the original production of Cabaret as Sally Bowles. They were, one of them was the understudy, that was the first replacement for Jill Hayworth, I think, as in Cabaret, and they did a whole medley of songs from Cabaret talking about the show a little bit. We ended up, Andre DeShields sang from The Wiz, and then the last thing we had was around several members of the original production of Hair from 1968 singing a little medley of Hair, talking all about how Hair was revolutionary for its time. And it's just great working with people from that era there's nothing like them now. And that's why I love doing concerts like that. It's just a pleasure.
Yeah. I just look at my LP collection and go, yeah, no one knows this one. No one knows this one. They should. And that's why I put all this stuff on the radio station. Like that was the whole point of it. If I wanted to get lots of people listening, I would just put the top 50 and leave it at that. But you know what? There's more to life than that. We have 110 years of musical theater or whatever it is. And so many shows that, even if the show never worked very well, even if every song, because let's be honest, not every song is good on a cast recording, but there's always one. There's always one that should be heard and listened to and remembered. So I try to do that, and I think you do the same thing with getting people to sing these songs.
I agree. And if you look at some of the albums of Robert Sher I was telling you about, SHER, he did in 1998 there was a highly touted production of Follies at the Paper Mill Playhouse in New Jersey, featuring Donna McKechnie and Lawrence Guittard and wonderful people. And Robert produced the cast album, but he got the idea, like he did with Fiddler, to include all of the cut songs from Follies. And he had this cast, which included Ann Miller, and it was a ridiculous cast of incredibly talented people, sing the songs on the CD that were cut. So I did a concert last Tuesday with Charles Kirsch. Charles Kirsch is a podcaster. For the past 2 years, he's had a podcast called Backstage Babble, where he's interviewed everybody from Joel Grey to Tito Rivera. I've been on it myself, and he's had over 120 guests, and he picked some of the great guests. We had an amazing concert with Len Cariou and Kurt Peterson, the great Broadway star. First, he sang a song that was cut from him from Dear World. Then he sang a song that's on this Follies CD called The World's Full of Girls, which was cut from Follies. And then he ended up singing Proud Lady. If you know the song Proud Lady from The Baker's Wife by Stephen Schwartz, it's a very popular audition song, and it was cut from Baker's Wife, but he sang it originally. It's now been put back into the new version of Baker's Wife, but he sang it brilliantly, and it was great having him there in this concert. And Leroy Reams, the wonderful Leroy Reams, the original Billy Lawler in 42nd Street, who was also in the original Applause, the one to sing Applause originally. He did both concerts with me recently. He did a whole Hello Dolly thing because he's put up Hello Dolly all over the world and was in it with Carol Channing and then directed it with Carol Channing. And he was also did the other night, he did a 42nd Street thing. So it's just great having these wonderful people who are still around. Leroy's 80, but he looks like he's 50. I mean, he's 80 is the new 50, I say. So that means I'm 20 now, right? In terms of 60 is the new 20, 61 is the new 20. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Michael, I could talk with you for hours. Just listen to the stories and talk about the shows that, maybe you and I are the only ones who know, really, and the people that are in it.
Yeah.
But congratulations on everything you've done and accomplished, and especially keeping these shows alive. And
my pleasure. I like doing it. Like people knowing great songs are out there.
Awesome. Well, you know what? Maybe I'll have you back on again.
I would love that, Jean Paul, anytime.
More stuff. But before we go, I always ask 3 questions of my guests. There's no right or wrong answer, but my listeners are judgy, as most people in theater are. So, whatever you say, someone's not going to like it, but that's okay. That's their problem. So, question number 1. And this might be a hard one for you. What creator or team within musical theater has had a great influence on you? It could be a composer, a lyricist, director, producer, actor, even stage manager. Could be somebody famous or not famous, like a teacher. So there's somebody who's had a good influence on you. I know all the people we talked about.
Right. I'd probably say all those people. Yeah. I think the obvious answer for most people often is Stephen Sondheim, because there's nobody like him. And since I've known him since I was 18 and learned from him and had many letters in which he's given me advice over the years, I might be likely to pick him. I'd also say Hugh Martin, because Hugh Martin was Judy Garland's vocal coach. And I got to know him through a guy named Bruce Pomahack, who worked at the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization and had orchestrated and conducted the Meet Me in St. Louis revival and knew Hugh well. He said, if you're ever interested, around 25 years ago, he said, if you're ever interested in meeting Hugh Martin, I went, what? Really? And Hugh would have me at his grand piano in Encinitas singing songs, and he'd coach me on them like he coached Judy Garland. He would say, Michael, that's very good, but you should play that a little softer. And he'd work with me as what I do with my students. He, physician heal thyself. I was being, taught by the master. And I think I learned so much about what to do and what not to do. I'm not saying I do it right all the time, but he was certainly instrumental because I loved his material. Sondheim was an enormous fan of his. And so I think I'd probably say Hugh, if not Sondheim.
Fantastic answers. Both correct. You know what? 1.5 points out of 1. So there you go. So question number 2, with your vast knowledge of songs and shows from, the time, that music theater has been around, do you know of any musicals about firefighters?
Oh, because I wanted to be a firefighter.
Yeah.
There's a song called The Fireman's Flame. I think it's from Up in Central Park by Sigmund Romberg and Dorothy Fields. I don't know if there's a whole show about firefighters.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so.
Then what do you know of a show that has a weird job title? We got waitress, we've got all these type of things. Is there anything out there that you can think of that's about a weird employment?
There was a show called Nowhere to Go But Up, which was about 2 bank robbers. There was a show called Kelly, a famous one-night flop about a guy who jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge. That wasn't his job, but that was what he did in the show.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, my mind's a sieve
I
right
know.
now. I bet there are so many shows about weird occupations of people who had bizarre, careers.
What about weird premises? Just as thrown out there. What shows can you think of? You go, that's a weird premise, but I like it.
Well, I think Kelly, what I just said, a guy he wants to kill himself. He's been spending the whole time getting ready to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge. I think that's a weird premise. And I bet there are a million ones. I think
Yeah.
having to sit down and look at a list and go, that reminds me of that show. And
Yeah,
there's
I know.
one.
I'm putting you on the spot. So you know what? Correct answer. All those anyways. So another point.
I do my best.
Third question. Food in the theater or cell phones in the theater? Which is worse?
You mean cell phones on in the theater?
Yeah.
I think cell phones are worse because food, as long as it's not in incredibly noisy wrappers, and they're starting to sell food and sell water intermission. So if it's quiet and I don't hear the crinkling, it's the old people who have their hard candies in cellophane, and they sit there spending around 2 minutes opening one candy, and you just hear crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. That's what's crazy. If it's quiet, and also if you're not going to bring in a hot pastrami sandwich and you smell it, but that's a different thing. But if it's just food like Slim Jims that nobody's going to taste, and you can have them loosely and just take a bite with like that. Or I have gummy bears sometimes like that. If it's stuff like that that's not noisy, definitely food.
Okay.
I just
interviewed someone who said they were at a theater across the street from it was a chicken place. So at intermission, people would go get chicken and come bring back into the theater. So
and it was an overwhelming smell of fried chicken.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that can be very frustrating. And I think that's the exception. But I think, taking if the cell phones, I mean, I have my cell phone on silent. Sometimes I turn it off, but I like to have it on silent. So sometimes I'm sitting there and there's an exciting moment. I'm going, oh, I'm getting a phone call. Okay. Right. It starts vibrating, and you want to know. But of course, it's better to turn it off. And people think that there's something's going to happen. What drives me crazy is in Broadway houses, people have spent $230 for a ticket, and I see them sitting there checking their Facebook feed during a show. I'm like, I know you're bored, but really? Like, there's the famous story of Madonna at Hamilton, and when it was before it moved to Broadway, when it was at the Public, and Lin-Manuel tweeted in intermission, "Thanks, Madonna, for checking your phone during my big solo," or something like that. I may be getting that story wrong, but something like that. And I'm like, really? Did you need to do that? I just feel like people can wait. People think, I guess if you're a doctor, you give the head usher, your location. So if there's an emergency, they'll come and get you. But otherwise, it's such a short time you're in a house. Why not just watch the show? And I don't know if you're one of the people who sees somebody next to you or in front of you, doing stuff on their phone. Do you tap them and say, "Excuse me, can you wait till intermission?" I don't do that because this person's going to turn around with a gun. But I'm like, I'll wait. But it does drive me a little crazy. I'm like, God, just wait till it's over, please.
Yeah, because you think about it, in the 60s, the 70s, the 50s, you didn't have as many emergencies that could come up just like now. Like, come on, you can sit through 2.5 hours.
There's no emergency that's worth, if you do that, don't go to the show. Why would you go to the show? I went to see Plaza Suite with Matthew Broderick and Sarah Jessica Parker, and somebody got me house seats, and I was sitting next to some very, very drunk people who had a bottle of booze. This was back in the heat of COVID, so everybody was supposed to wear masks in the theater. They would take off their masks as soon as the show started, be drinking. They were so drunk. Wow. And I was sitting there going, I can't believe, you have alcohol in the theater, you're drinking, sloshing it down. I mean, I guess they sell alcohol at the bar, but no, I think that's behavior of people today is out of control. I mean, with A Rock of Ages, a show that I invested in, and on Broadway, the Toronto production, the London production, national tour, Australia, they sold beer, and everybody encouraged, because there was a rowdy party atmosphere for the show, but it was still a very entertaining show. I really liked it. I love that. I invested. It was so much fun, but people were very drunk in the audience. So it was crazy. I was like, okay, you're encouraging them to drink beer. Go for it.
That type of show, though, I can see. I'm like, you know what you're getting yourself into. They break the fourth wall. Like, it's that type of atmosphere. So if somebody's drinking, I'm like, that just fits. When you hold up your lighter,
show like that, shows like that are so rare. I think like Moulin Rouge might be skirting it too, but I think it's a show. I mean, you're not playing to the audience. You're kind of our Danny Burstein is, but nobody else is. But I don't know.
I love that show, by the way. I saw it in Toronto. It's like, I got to show it to my lady friend when it comes back somewhere.
What, Moulin Rouge, you mean?
No. Rock of Ages.
I knew it had a successful run in Toronto. Unfortunately, I invested so much, 2.5 times the money in Australia where it tanked. But I mean, I made money on all the other productions, but I never made money overall because I invested in it because I thought Australia loves their rock musicals and they didn't love this one. So
that's weird.
We all agreed it was the best production of all the productions. I was at opening night with the director and choreographer, and they said, this is the finest production. Nothing will ever surpass it. But you couldn't get, they called them the Bogans. The Bogans, here we call them the bridge and tunnel crowd, the crowd from, New Jersey, the crowd from the outskirts. They couldn't get, they were the target audience and they couldn't get them to come in. I think the producers were initially reluctant to give any kind of discount, which they did on Broadway. When Rock of Ages, they reduced all the prices to $79 or $89, and they were immediately selling out. And they started gradually bringing the price back up. They should have done that in Australia. It was a very smart strategy. And
interesting
strategy. Who knows what's going to be a big hit?
Exactly. Another correct answer from whatever our question was way back.
Yeah, thank you.
So 3.5
cell phones are food. Yeah,
that's right. And I will accept both are terrible. I'm okay with that answer. So 3.5 points out of 3. Congratulations. You can't spend the points anywhere.
I will, but I can brag.
You can brag to everybody, like, look what I got. So you can brag to Noel, because I had Noel on a while ago. So you
had Noel Katz on.
Yeah, I had Noel. I can't even remember when. It was a couple of years ago even.
Wow. And I brag to Carl Danielson.
Yep, and Carl, and like there's a bunch of people that I think you've talked about, I've had on, or we've done
I love
stuff
that.
with.
That's great.
So
great.
So again, Michael, thank you so much for coming on and telling us all about everything.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
All right. So we were just speaking with Michael Lavine here on Be Our Guest. Tune in next week as we'll be speaking with another guest or guests about their life, love, and passion that is musical theater. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanov. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.